Yeah, the title of tonight's talk is, as you might have read from the program, is "The Three Stages of Musical Subjectivity in the Age of Post-digitalism." Whatever this may mean, we will see during the lecture we give you, or the lecture performance, as we call it today.
Sure.
And the basic idea is to give you a psychoanalysis of contemporary pop music from over the last decade, which we'd like to call the age of post-digitalism. And we'd like to ask the question, say, after the digitalization of musical production and distribution is completed, how has this affected pop music in terms of first, subjectivity, second, desire, and third, symbolic order? This is meant by the three stages of musical subjectivity. And we read a lot of books to make it more interesting for you, like the Anti-Oedipus by Deleuze and Guattari, and of course, Sein und Zeit by Martin Heidegger. And you're an Heidegger expert. You can.
This is true. Actually, incidentally, I'm a Heidegger expert.
Everything by heart, my dear. So don't do.
I would say the more important Heidegger text is actually the one in English, which is called "The Fundamental Concepts of Metaphysics."
I never knew that he'd wrote in English.
Yeah, his English writing is fabulous. It's actually super lucid. In English, it's way clearer.
Oh, of course, yeah. I thought the Latin version was the most clear. And we have another, of course, like everybody who's into pop discourse at the moment, is called Acceleration, the theory of accelerationism. Whatever this means, we'll see when we are going to the second music
And then
video.
an additional text, which is not physically available, called "We Are All Very Anxious."
Yeah.
Which is a text written by a group of philosophers, sociologists, artists, aestheticians, economists. The group calls themselves the Institute for Precarious Consciousness. You can look this text up on the internet. There's a reading of it on YouTube. We are all very anxious.
The reading lasts like 40 minutes, so as long as our lecture performance lasts as well.
Yeah, so if you have headphones,
we decided
just put your headphones in now and you can just listen to that instead. That'll be much more helpful.
But that's the reason why we decided not to show the video. But
correct.
Yes,
yeah.
That's okay.
But actually, quickly, I want to say one thing.
Of course.
Which is just quickly, apologize to Jens in advance for this, but I just wanted to say something about the boycott of the festival and like my personal response to it. And so it's complicated for me because I'm not performing at this festival. I'm just here talking. I was invited to the festival by Martin Hosbach, who's a long-time friend of mine and big supporter of How to Dress Well. He's booked essentially all of my shows here in Germany since 2010. And he said, "Do you want to perform at the festival?" I said, "No, I don't. I'm not really performing this summer. I'm just working on new music." He said, "Well, do you want a vacation to Berlin?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, well, let me come up with something." He said, what about if you and Jens talk?" I said, "Cool, great." And he said, "Okay, well, I can't really give you very much money." I said, "That's fine. Just fly me to Berlin, put me up for 10 days. That's already extremely generous for me to do essentially nothing." And so then I arrived in Berlin.
Talking to me is nothing.
I arrived here to discover the controversy around the festival, and so I have received like an honorarium, a small amount of money from the festival to speak, and I'm going to give that money to a group called the Center for Jewish Nonviolence. If you go to centerforjewishnonviolence.org, you can see the work that they do in Palestine and Israel. You know, I'm a Jewish person, whatever. My dad is Jewish, and politically a critic of Israel, and the occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza, and just generally the oppression of the Palestinian people. And so I do think it's important what's happening. I think it's a bit vexing the way it's happened. I mean, if Young Fathers and all the other artists who quit the festival would have also just come and performed or spoken about their views and values and then given their money, all the money that they would have collectively earned to, for instance, this one cause or many causes, it could have made actually quite an important impact. My friend runs the not-for-profit group that I mentioned. Her name is Ashley Borer. She actually is a colleague of mine from my the department in Chicago, where I'm doing my PhD in philosophy. I told her I was going to give them 1,500 euros, and she said that's like twice the amount of money they've received in donations in the last 2 years. And in the last 2 years, they've done 6 different trips. American Jewish activists, European people, Jews from the whole whatever Jewish diaspora go with this group, and they do things. For instance, their most recent bit of nonviolent resistance was they went into Palestine and they planted hundreds of trees, because the IDF has a practice of destroying all living things in Palestinian areas. So if they see a potted plant, they smash it. There are reports of them killing domesticated animals. They have ripped up all the trees. And so these Jewish activists from all over the world, they go into Palestine, they plant the trees, and then they set up encampments around the trees to protect them while they take root. And these encampments are important because the IDF can't just kill American Jewish political activists. They can't be as violent towards them as they could a group of Palestinians who would be attempting to protect the same tree. So most of these activists pay out of pocket to be there. And so any little bit of money is extremely helpful for these groups. Nobody's getting a paycheck at the in these groups. And so I just think that a moment, an opportunity was missed. And Thurston Moore went on Twitter to encourage all the artists involved to drop out of the festival. I think he should have gone on Twitter and encouraged all the artists to bring their favorite scholar of the situation in Israel and Palestine with the festival to them, with them to the festival, and have them speak on stage for the duration of their set, and then donate their money to a political agency of some stripe. I think that would have been an important gesture. So that's my take on the whole thing. Martin, you missed the part where I said I couldn't quit because my friend Martin had just agreed to give me a free vacation. I'm trying to think if I missed anything else here. I mean, I think, again, Ashley, my former colleague Ashley Borer, her trips to Palestine were really important for me, just in terms of understanding what life is like there. And I think that, if I would have been the recipient of, say, 12,000 euros for a festival performance here, I would have just said, hey, Ashley, I'm going to buy you a plane ticket. I need you to come and describe your experience there. I think that would have been made more of an impact than just quitting and saying so via Twitter, which I think is just kind of like, yeah, we were actually talking about this earlier. I'm extremely skeptical these days about the power of what I would call mere consciousness raising. I think just tweeting your political values and virtue signaling is only so important. I think that it's just trivially true that has to turn into action at some point in order for it to count as political. So, yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way before we start talking about pop music. I actually have something special that I've brought with me to premiere here. We actually premiered it in Los Angeles a few weeks ago as part of an art installation that I put together. I wrote a song on my last record called Anxious, and that song was directly inspired by the document I mentioned earlier, this We Are All Very Anxious document by Plan C, the Institute for Precarious Consciousness. And the gesture of the song is to make, I wanted to make the most bubblegum, annoying, saccharine pop song I could, and then formally just pure pop, and then see how much non-pop content I could stuff into the lyrics and have it still be pop. I think it ended up being actually just mangled and grotesque and disgusting. I don't like listening to the song that much. I've never performed it live. But I made a music video for it with a friend and amazing artist of mine, Jason Abayer. He's a 3D visual artist from Sydney, Australia. His work is fucking sick and psycho and super just fucked up, wild queer 3D imaginaries. So sick. I worked with him and a novelist from America named Alexandra Kleeman. She's a childhood friend of mine who also wrote an amazing novel called You Too Can Have a Body Like Mine. It's been translated into German, if you want to read it in German. But the three of us made this video together, and I wanted to do the thank you guys for having me and show it here for the first time. So it's going to go online in a few weeks, but we're now going to watch this video and from there segue into our talk. Yeah? So this is the brand new video for my song called Anxious. Thank you guys.
And don't put it on YouTube, of course.
Yeah, put it on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. Okay, now pop music.
Is it pop music?
That song.
Yeah.
So this is maybe a good segue into the geography of the talk or whatever. I think that anybody who listens to both pop music and good music is aware of something that I would call like the supra-historical thing we call pop. So historically, at any given moment, there's the top 100 songs on the chart, and mostly in the last 40 years, all 100 of those songs at any given time have been fucking terrible. Just awful music that no one would want to listen to. Literally that only like suburban, like 16-year-olds listen to outside of Phoenix, Arizona, while they're like putting on their makeup to go to their friend's house for a dinner party or whatever. Just real trash music. However, we all also know that like New Order is amazing. And you want to say Flim by Aphex Twin. Now that's a great pop song somehow. And so I became aware of this like super historical character of pop, which isn't reducible to the charts at any given historical moment. But I've never really been able to pin down what it is. I mean, I think my art, my music or whatever is like always kind of exploring if I can render that super historical thing called pop in a way that you don't have to put it in like a shitty historical pop body. This song is like an experiment of just taking the shitty pop body and trying to bring the super historical stuff into it as much as possible. I think it's a failure.
But it's interesting. Would you describe your own songs as shitty? I liked it. So
that song
do I have a problem if I like that music? Is it meant to be?
No, I love that song. I wouldn't have put it out if I didn't love it.
Liked?
But I definitely think so. I don't like in my work to engage kitsch very much. This song is obviously kitsch in a decisive way. I mean, there's like the like the hand drums where it's like I can just imagine like Australian businessmen with like their sides of their heads shaved, like on a beach, being like, "Man, this is a good song." Like, fuck, what is this? Like, Shazam it! Like,
geile Mucke, wie wir in Berlin sagen.
But that's not typically the group for whom I make my work, and I think kitsch is dangerous. But I indulged a little bit of kitsch for this song.
But kitsch would mean that the feelings which are represented in that music aren't serious.
Yeah,
they're faked.
So it's formally kitsch. The feelings are extremely serious. The feelings of the song are sort of like a phenomenology of living under contemporary informatic capitalism. The sort of pop banner songs, the lyric is I had a nightmare about my Twitter mentions. So the lyrics aren't kitsch. The song formally is kitsch.
Would you say that your singing is kitsch? Is there
moments are?
Yeah. But is there a special kind of singing technique which you can adopt or take away? Yeah. Which even brings you over the edge of being not authentic?
Yeah, I mean that involves indulging tropes, and that's also an essential part of what makes pop music pop music is the legacy of tropes. So there's the post-chorus element in that song goes and that that interval is now described musicologically as the millennial whoop. You hear it like it's if you haven't seen these YouTube compilations of all the millennial whoops, they're fucking savage. It's awful.
Has been established by Mariah Carey in the 90s
and Katy Perry. Destroyed it just pummeled it into the ground.
Yeah. It's like the blue note of today.
Yeah, for sure. And so like I brought that into the post-chorus as a kitsch gesture after singing about the complete lack of agency and the disappearance of the soul and the spirit under contemporary capitalism. And then, comes after that description, because I'm trying to sort of like indicate how the millennial whoop is both a symptom of a disease and also this desperate attempt to overcome the disease.
But why is it a symptom of a disease? Because it's so formulaic.
Yeah.
Because it's so verdinglicht,
yeah. What's the English word for that?
Do you have an English word for that?
Yeah, we do. It's obviously translated out of critical theory in a certain way. I can't remember. Reified.
Reified, yeah.
Yeah, it's because of the reification. So it's become an ideological indicator rather than a musical, spiritual, like moment of real emotional intensity.
But wouldn't it
like I sing in the second verse, I sing, "Someone told me, not ironic, that less meaning means more profit."
Yeah, but I'm just thinking. I just returned from a 5 days festival, also here in Berlin, the Berlin Atonal Festival, which was 5 days of dark, melodic music, very sad people playing in the dark, and I thought if they would have put up that kind of lyrics in their industrial, we are also sad and angry mode, would it then be more authentic than what you do? Isn't the most kitschy thing at the moment to making depressed music?
Yeah, so this is the problem. This is where we stand. Is that there is no proper path to authenticity. Everything has been reified and co-opted and churned out in an acceptable form in the capitalist machine. You know what I mean? So now that like the corporate music festival has replaced the rave now is different also. And so now when you go to the rave, it's already been robbed of its authenticity. I mean, it's really funny walking around Berlin. You see so many teenagers dressed like 90s ravers. It's fucking wild, and it's become a uniform. Right? It's become a uniform of...
But isn't that the sense of youth culture, that people wear uniforms?
It's different. You know what I mean? It used to be...
When we were gothic kids in the 80s, at least me, we were wearing...
I was like 18 months old. I was
wearing uniforms as well. So
but I think that the uniforms function differently. So they signaled in a different way than they do now. But yeah, interesting.
But if I understand the lyrics of the text of the song correctly, then anxiety is not only a mode of subjectivity, which is supernatural or super historical, metaphysically given in a way, but your diagnosis of the contemporary circumstances, the contemporary conditions. Why do you think we live in a state of anxiety? And what has changed over the last, say, decade?
I mean, so the hypothesis of that document that I keep coming back to is that every phase of capitalism has a different dominant affect which attends that material, economic, political phase. Consider industrial capitalism. The dominant affect was boredom. You imagine the monotony of the industrial workplace, the machine line. We often hear in America about the sexual revolution being born of bored housewives no longer willing to be housewives. That boredom it was the dominant affect, but it also was the site for a revolution to a new form of capitalism. The boredom of the worker allowed them, and also the spatial construction of that workplace with the boss up in the glass case and the workers all down on the ground so bored, it allowed the workers to establish certain forms of solidarity. So the boss couldn't hear you talk. As long as you were pulling the lever and smashing the metal, you could say to your friend, like, "Hey, Jack, like, let's put a wrench in the machine. Like at noon, everybody stop, and then it'll fuck up the whole machine. Nowadays, workplaces are organized horizontally, as we say, rather than vertically. And so the boss is on the field of play with you, and the work-play distinction has been blurred. So that Tuesdays it's smoothie day, and there's a yoga studio in the corporate milieu. And now, because the boss could be any one of you, and we're all working together, every one of you is the boss. It used to be that I could form links of solidarity with my comrades on the floor, and we all hated the boss. But now everybody is a click away from being the boss. That's like the way anxiety became the dominant affect. Just considering the corporate milieu as like a laboratory, you can see now how the affect is distributed in this generalized, confused way.
But doesn't that mean that, given what you have described, and given that it all belongs to that kind of 24/7 culture, so you're not alone at any moment of your life, and you're
24/7 culture.
Yeah, and you're into the working process. There's no boundary line between the working day and your private life. So,
right, and you're supposed to, even if you're just like a shitty Starbucks worker, you're supposed to pour your soul into your work.
Yeah, so completely collectivated in a way. So you're de-individualized.
Yeah.
Then I was asking myself in that video you screened.
And also hyper-individualized through surveillance and self-policing.
Yeah, but there's a feeling of complete isolation and loneliness. And I thought that loneliness and being alone and with yourself is the only refuge from the hyper-capitalist circumstances.
But it's not a refuge, so we're like hyper-connected and through that alone. So, yeah, on the one hand, we're more connected than ever. This is just trivial at this point. It's like we all know this. More connected than ever, more alone than ever.
What does it make? What does it mean for making music then? So we're going to talk about. We wanted to talk about how those social processes are reflected in the production of music. And when I look back at the last decade, when I first saw you playing in Berghain Kantine, I think 2011, there was kind of seemed to be some atmosphere that now everything is possible because digital distribution and production and pre-installed software has given means to everybody to make music now, and so all the restrictions by the classical fordistically tailorized cultural industry are blown away, so that there's a whole new world of possibilities going on.
There was a moment, I think, in between 2008 and 2012 where...
This was when you started, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been making music for a long time, but then I think, like a lot of people, I felt like there was a moment of a real special and powerful moment where the means of music production were democratized. This is like the birth time of SoundCloud and Bandcamp and stuff like that. And then suddenly, How to Dress Well could be a worldwide touring act. You know what I mean? I went from making my first record in my bedroom in Cologne to touring Asia, South America, all of Europe, going to Moscow to play shows, St. Petersburg. Like, it was very confusing to me, and it felt, and a lot of people felt like we had entered a novel situation. But I think now, that revolutionary moment, the powers that be have corrected, have righted themselves.
Yeah, but what happened?
It's unclear. I mean, I think there was a moment where you didn't need just exorbitant capital power to spread your music internationally and connect with people. And it's now returned to a situation where you need exorbitant capital power once again. I think about just the transformation at like a pitchfork.com, where in 2010, like they, put on artists like me and One O Tricks Point Never and other artists who now have careers and stuff. And now My friends,
they were sold to Condé Nast, and things went
yeah,
down.
and now it's unclear which posts are sponsored posts and which posts aren't. But then even more interestingly, a band like Whitney, friends of mine play in this band called Whitney, they were like a big, Pitchfork got behind them last year. They sold 2,000 records.
Worldwide.
And they tour incessantly, and their guarantees are staying at a pretty savagely low ceiling, given that it's a 5-person band and touring is expensive. Between my third and fourth record sold the same amount, even though Domino put a lot more money into the fourth record, and we put a lot more money into advertising the fourth record. Between my third and fourth record, iTunes became a streaming service. Artists like How to Dress Well used to sell a lot of records through iTunes. And it's not just the record sales that are important. It's the character of the connection through the different platforms are just so different. So I have a hypothesis, and I don't know exactly how to test this, but I would love it if like a sociologist would generate a test for this. My hypothesis is this. Someone buys a record through iTunes. They listen to it once through. Someone streams a record on Spotify 100 times. I actually think that the person who's more likely to buy a concert ticket is the former rather than the latter. Because even a pure digital transfer of currency for a digital entity establishes a more material connection than the ephemeral activity of playing music on a streaming service. And concert sales are down worldwide for all acts of all sizes, including your Beyoncés and Kanye Wests and so forth. There's something about the character of the contemporary music distribution that actually threatens music in a totally novel way. So 2008 and 10 was an interesting moment where it was transitioning to a technological informatic form of the music industry, but it hadn't yet transitioned into this like reappropriated, re-commercialized Spotify world. And I love Spotify. They've done a lot of good stuff for my career. Thank you, Spotify, if you're watching. Honestly, though, I also use Spotify. I love Spotify. Okay, I just want everybody to know I love Spotify. Now, this is also anxiety, right? I'm like, this is how anxiety works in the 21st century. I'm aware that somebody could tweet something about Spotify and it could actually jeopardize my future earning potential and my future career. Like, if I'm homeless in 4 years, it's because I talked shit about Spotify here today.
We won't tell. But what does that mean in future terms for the artistic strategy of connecting the belief which turned out in 2010, 2011 that mainstream and underground could mingle in a creative way? Because there were so many young beat makers. After a year of their career, they were making beats for Kanye and for Jay-Z and so on, and then they went back and made a career out of that, which was a phenomenon, as far as I can see, which lasted only for 3 or 4 years. Now it's not a valid career phenomenon as well. It's
interesting. I worked on the Kanye record, this most recent one.
I know that. That's why I'm asking.
And I received $0 for it, and it was so disheartening.
He steps, does he?
There's a song on the record called Freestyle Number 4, which I did some production on with some other people. And Freestyle Number 4, a song called Freestyle Number 4 by Kanye West, was written by Sci-Hi the Prince, a really mediocre rapper, hence the mediocrity of that song, and then was later performed by Kanye after being workshopped with other rappers, including Lil Uzi Vert, being produced and reproduced. They brought me in to sing on it. I couldn't really come up with anything, so that I didn't end up on the track. Designer, the rapper, rapped on it. It was an absolute nightmare watching him try and rap on it. And then Kanye just ended up re-rapping the Sci-Hi the Prince thing and calling it Freestyle Number 4.
Okay.
So that's just for me, it was such a perfect phenomenology of how the contemporary situation is. They went on the internet, they were like, who's cool? Let's get these like 6 cool producers in. And then they got some other rappers to write it and labor over it. I don't know how much money they're making. I know that Sci-Hi he's been on retainer with Kanye for 10 years or something. So he's just a paid rapper to write raps that Kanye raps.
So that's a dead end in a way.
It's a dead end.
Yeah.
And I have friends who worked on, I think you're probably referring to the internet omnivorous workplace of Yeezus, where like Evian Christ and Arca and all these people worked on that record. I went to Paris for that as well, and it was so bizarre. Nobody essential from the Kanye team was there. It was just like a bunch of guys that, all knew each other from Sonar in Barcelona, all in hotel rooms making music on headphones. And being like, yeah, I guess they'd be like, yeah, send anything. Be like, this is like a 30-second thing of white noise. They'd be like, sick, send it. And then you like send it and then it disappears and then a record comes out. You learn from the internet that a record comes out and that it has your white noise on it and that you weren't credited. And it's a very disheartening thing. I think actually there's a homology between, I don't know if you guys remember the internet before 2011 or 12, but there were these things where you could discover music called blogs. And there were a lot of blogs that helped a lot of artists start to build fan bases beyond their Bandcamps and SoundClouds. And then Pitchfork created this thing called Altered Zones, whereby they bought all of the blogs and made them stop putting things on their blogs and just putting things on Altered Zones. And then about 18 months after that, they shut down Altered Zones, thereby completely squashing all of the independent means of discovering and distributing music. That was a cool moment where like I could put out a song, some kid from Indiana could put out a song, and then you'd be like, okay, like it's the morning, I'm gonna open my 7 tabs and like, whoa, this is fucking crazy music I've never heard and I have no means of hearing. It's not on a label yet. It's like, literally the guy finished the song last night and now it's up on my browser. That was a really special moment where it felt like there was a new possibility of spontaneity and connection, and people were posting demos as they were working on them. It was really thrilling. And that moment got squashed.
So the good moments are all gone. We've got 1 minute to go. I'm sorry.
We didn't make it past the first phase, which is my
we have 2 more
phenomenology.
videos to show. I think this is impossible in that time. We wanted to show Lady Gaga, which is in your, as far as I have understood you, the face of all evil, which happened.
I love Lady Gaga, but
to pop music and over the last years.
I think that the most recent record is her Trump record.
We can show as a closing movie, but perhaps there's one optimistic perspective for the future. Can you think of anything? Sorry to ask.
I think that every time capitalism performs these, gymnastic consolidations of cool shit into saleable shit, there's a reemergence of an underground. I think that we need new means of accessing the underground now, because I actually think, and in about 5 years I'll know if this is true or not, I think the internet is over as anything meaningful. The internet is completely like the shopping mall was in 1989 or whatever. There's nothing on the internet. I think that like there's going to be an underground outside of the internet again in the next 10 years.
So we meet at.
I just hope it's not excessively localized. That was the problem. That was what was special about 2008 to 2012, is that there was an underground which was global.
Yeah.
And it was accessible. And now returning to a localized underground where it's just like super like elitist kids like having like a group of their friends that play music that's really sick, and then like you're like a dork and you're like, I want to come. They're like, no. Like that sucks. And that was what was cool about the internet, was that you could just be like a music nerd and hear what the coolest kids in Shanghai were making. So that's my moment of optimism.
Thank you very much. We'll
thank
see
you.
Lady Gaga as an outro.
Oh yeah,
Tom,
just as an outro.
just one word to Lady Gaga.
Yeah, as an outro, the reason I think this Lady Gaga is evil is because it's all a simulation of authenticity, and they like looked at the Kanye West type model and they were like, let's get some indie stars to write this song, let's get the Tame Impala guy, let's get so and so to write this song, and then she introduced this record to the world, touring it through a thing that Bud Light sponsored called the Dive Bar Tour. So Lady Gaga did a dive bar tour. Like this is the again, the gymnastics of like authentication are so pathetic and so grandiose. And so she went out like Lady Gaga back to just being a workaday rock star. And so that whole record, I mean, it flopped. It was a complete failure because there's still a minimal, people are still minimally, there's like a, what's the word? Like an Ahnung. What is the word in English?
Feeling?
No, but it's like intimation.
Intimation, yeah.
An intimation of just how this isn't authenticity.
There was something wrong with it, yeah.
Yeah. There was something wrong with it. And so I think that's maybe... Bitte sehr?
Sie konnten den Braten riechen. The meat.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so thank you guys for listening.
Meat.
Everybody smell the meat and let's watch Lady Gaga. Danke. Tschüss. 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 Tschüssi.